47 warships surrounded a single human patrol vessel, and every alien commander thought it would be over in minutes. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more HFY stories. Fleet Commander Vexar's compound eyes refracted the pale light of the tactical display into 1,000 fractured images, each one showing the same impossible truth. An unauthorized vessel had penetrated Catheen's space. The war room of the Sovereign Talon hummed with the chittering of his officers, their mandibles clicking in anticipation. This far into the outer territories, intruders were rare. Intruders who survived were rarer still. Confirmation. Sensor Adept. Krisha. Vextar's voice carried the authority of 3 decades commanding the Catherine Collective's border fleets. His exoskeleton, polished to an obsidian sheen, caught the blue glow of the holographic projections. Confirmed. Commander Krisha's antenna twitched as she processed the data streams flowing across her neural interface. Single vessel configuration unknown. No matching signatures in our database. No response to standard hails across 12 frequency bands. Vextar leaned forward, his forearms folding in a gesture his subordinates recognized as predatory interest. Size approximately 200 meters. Commander mass readings suggest light frigate classification, minimal energy output, no active weapon signatures. She paused, mandibles spreading slightly. Commander, the vessel's hull composition is anomalous. Our sensors are having difficulty achieving full penetration. Stealth technology possibly, or simply primitive shielding we haven't encountered before. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled officers, a sound like wind through crystal chimes. Primitive. The word hung in the recycled air like a verdict already passed. Vextar accessed the strategic database through his neural link, pulling up recent intelligence reports. The outer territories had seen an influx of new spacefaring species over the past decade, most of them barely capable of faster-than-light travel, none of them worth the Catherine Collective's concern. But unidentified meant potentially valuable either as salvage or as an example to other would-be trespassers. Deploy standard containment formation, Vextar ordered. I want that vessel immobilized and boarded within the hour. If they are carrying anything worth the collective time, I want it cataloged. Oh, if not, he let the implication hang. By your command. Tactical strategist, Velaric's claws danced across the holographic interface. Across the fleet, 46 additional warships responded to the Sovereign Talon's directive, their void black holes cutting through space like shards of night given purpose. The Catherine Collective had patrolled these borders for 400 cycles. In that time, they had crushed pirate syndicates, absorbed lesser civilizations, and established themselves as the unquestionable authority in this sector. Their ships were forged from condensed matter, plating their weapons capable of atomizing asteroids. Their crews trained from lateral stage in the art of void combat. A single unidentified vessel was not a threat, it was an inconvenience. Vextar watched as his fleet moved into position with practiced precision. The formation was textbook, a 3-dimensional cage of overlapping firing solutions and tractor beam projections designed to prevent any possibility of escape. 6 heavy cruisers anchored the formation's vertices. 30 frigates formed the interlocking web. 10 corvettes stood ready to exploit any gap in the target's response. And at the center, unmoving, sat the intruder. Range closing to 10,000 kilometers. Commander Felix reported. Formation stable. All vessels report weapons hot and targeting locks achieved. Still no response to hails, Vextar asked. None, Commander. The vessel has not altered course, speed, or energy output. It's simply drifting. That was the first wrong note, a dissonance that scratched at the edges of Vextar's tactical instincts. Ships didn't simply drift when surrounded by overwhelming force. They ran, they surrendered, they fought, they reacted. Plus, this vessel did nothing. Visual confirmation, he demanded. The main display shifted, magnifying the target vessel. Vexar's eyes absorbed every detail of the strange craft. Its hull was smooth, almost organic in its curves, lacking the angular aggression of Catherine design or the crude functionality of most primitive species. No visible weapons ports. No prominent sensor arrays. No external markings beyond a sequence of symbols near what appeared to be the stern characters in a script the translation matrix couldn't parse. Why spectral analysis shows the hull is composed of layered alloys we have no record of, Krisha reported, her voice taking on the rapid cadence of scientific curiosity overriding military protocol. The energy signatures are peculiar, Commander. There is a baseline hum to the vessel that doesn't match any known reactor type, and the mass-to-volume asterisk ratio is wrong. The ship is either hollow or contains materials denser than our sensors can properly classify. Irrelevant, Vextar said, though a small part of his tactical mind filed the information away. Anomalies were either opportunities or traps, and the Catherine Collective had not survived 4 centuries by ignoring either. Maintain formation. Prepare boarding pods. I want that vessel's data banks extracted and its crew questioned before the cycle ends. Commander Velrix interjected, his tone carefully neutral. Should we perhaps wait for reinforcements? If this is an unknown technological paradigm, we have 47 warships. Strategist Vexar's words were edged with the kind of patience reserved for subordinates who had forgotten their place. If this vessel poses any threat to that level of force, then the collective has already lost the sector. Proceed. The silence that followed was acknowledgement enough. But as Vextar watched the mysterious vessel continue on its slow, unconcerned drift through the center of his kill box, something ancient and instinctual whispered in the back of his mind, a voice honed by evolution on a world where the deadliest predators were the ones who appeared harmless until the moment they struck. The vessel wasn't drifting, it was waiting. Act 21,252, Act T2, the escalation. The Sovereign Talons of Communications Array cycled through every known diplomatic frequency, broadcasting the same message in 43 languages, each one a slight variation on the same ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. The human vessel's response was silence. 5,000 kilometers and closing. Felix announced. His claws had stopped their usual dancing across the tactical display. They now hovered motionless over the firing protocols. All vessels report optimal firing solutions. Our tractor beams are locked and ready for deployment. Vextar studied the formation through his neural link, seeing the battlefield from a dozen different perspectives simultaneously. Every angle was covered, every contingency planned. The intruder had nowhere to go, even if it suddenly developed the inclination to flee. One final hail, he ordered. Standard surrender terms. 10 seconds to comply. Crishaw transmitted the message. The chronometer on the main display counted down with mechanical precision. 10 seconds became 9, 9 became 5, 5 became 0. Nothing. Commander Crishaw's antennae were fully extended now, quivering with what Vextar recognized as confusion rather than fear. The vessel's energy signatures just changed, not increasing, redistributing. There's activity throughout the hall, but I can't determine its purpose. It's like they're running diagnostics. Diagnostics. Velix's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. They're surrounded by 47 warships and they're running system checks. Deploy tractor beams, Vextar commanded. Let's see how they respond to immobilization. 6 heavy cruisers activated their graviton projectors simultaneously. Invisible beams of twisted space-time reached out toward the human vessel, designed to lock it in place with the force of a collapsing star gravity well. The beams touched the ship's hull and slid off as if the vessel existed in a slightly different dimension, one where Catherine technology couldn't quite find purchase. Tractor beam failure, Vextar demanded. No, Commander. Crishaw's voice had lost all trace of amusement. The beams are functioning perfectly. They're just not affecting the target. It's as if the vessel has 0 mass, but our sensors clearly register substantial mass. This shouldn't be possible. Vextar felt the first cold touch of uncertainty. In 30 years of void combat, he had encountered ships that resisted tractor beams, heavily shielded vessels, ships with counter-graviton generators, even experimental phase displacement craft. But those all showed clear evidence of their countermeasures. This vessel simply existed in a state that made his fleet technology irrelevant. Fire a warning shot, he ordered. Plasma bolt minimum yield across their bow. Let them know we're serious. The frigate Claw of Justice obeyed instantly. A lance of superheated plasma, bright enough to scar retinas, streaked across the issue toward the human vessel. It should have passed within meters of the ship's bow, a demonstration of precision and power. Instead, it simply stopped. 3 meters from the human vessel's hull, the plasma bolt dissipated like morning fog, its energy scattering into harmless photons that made the surrounding space shimmer briefly before fading. The war room fell silent. Even the ever-present hum of the Sovereign Talon system seemed muted, as if reality itself was holding its breath. Report, Vextar said, his voice carefully controlled. The plasma bolt encountered some form of field we cannot detect. Krisha said slowly, her scientific training warring with what her instruments told her. Commander, the vessel didn't activate any shields. There was no energy spike, no defensive system deployment. The plasma just ceased to exist in weapon form approximately 3 meters from the hull. Impossible. I'm aware of the impossibility. Commander, I'm reporting what happened. Vexor accessed the sensor feeds directly through his neural link, bypassing Krishaw's interpretation to see the raw data himself. She was right. The plasma had contacted something. But that something registered on their instruments as absolutely nothing. No energy signature, no particle displacement, no gravitational distortion. It was as if the laws of physics had simply decided that weapons couldn't exist within a certain radius of the human vessel. Perhaps suggested carefully, a new signal appeared on every screen simultaneously. Not the multiple frequency diplomatic hail that Catherine had been broadcasting, but a single clean transmission on a frequency the Sovereign Talon's communications array had to recalibrate to receive. They're responding, Krisha announced unnecessarily. The voice that filled the war room was female human and carried the kind of calm that came not from ignorance, but from complete understanding of the situation. Catherine Vessel Sovereign Talon. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the UHS-5 Resolute. You are conducting military operations against a United Human Systems patrol vessel in neutral space. Your actions constitute an act of aggression under the Kepler Accords. I am authorized to inform you that you have one opportunity to withdraw your forces. This is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy. Vexor's mandibles spread wide, a gesture of pure disbelief. 47 warships surrounded this patrol vessel. Odd and the human was offering them a chance to withdraw. Patch me through, he ordered. Channel open. Commander unknown vessel. You are in clear violation of Catherine territorial sovereignty. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Your threats are I haven't made any threats, Commander Vexithar. The human's voice remained level, almost conversational. I've stated a fact. You have one opportunity to withdraw. I would recommend you take it. She knew his name. Vexthar's compound eyes refracted that impossibility into 1,000 fragments of growing concern. The transmission had been text-only standard military encryption. Nothing that should have revealed his identity to an unknown vessel with no connection to Catherine databases. How do your flagship's transponder signature is in our database? Chen continued, as if explaining something to a particularly slow student. As are the signatures of all 46 vessels in your formation. We've been tracking your fleet deployment patterns for the past 3 hours. Did you really think we drifted into your containment formation by accident? The war room's chittering died completely. Vexthar felt his exoskeleton plates shift, an involuntary response to threat that he hadn't experienced since his first combat deployment decades ago. You're claiming you allowed yourself to be surrounded, he said carefully. I'm stating that we were aware of your fleet presence before you were aware of ours, Commander. The Resolute has been conducting deep space observations in this sector for 2 weeks. Your vessels are not as stealthy as your tacticians believe. Velix pulled up the fleet's operational logs by cross-referencing the timeline. His mandibles clicked in agitation. Commander, if they were here for 2 weeks, they would have observed the Talon's full sensor sweep of this sector. They would have known our patrol routes, our response protocols, our entire defensive posture. Vexor finished the realization settling over him like ice. Krisha deep sensor scan full spectrum. I want to know everything about that vessel already running. Commander, results are contradictory. Her voice had taken on a tremor Vexith there had never heard before. The vessel's power output is minimal, barely enough to run life support and basic systems according to our models. But there are energy patterns underneath that baseline reading layers upon layers of dormant systems. Look, Commander, if those systems were active, so the power generation would exceed our entire fleet's combined output by a factor of she eiled off rechecking her instruments. By a factor of what, Sensor Adept? 12, Commander. A factor of 12. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. That's impossible, Veloric said. But his voice lacked conviction. No reactor design in known space can generate that much power in a vessel that size. The containment alone would require technology we don't possess. Vextor finished. His tactical instincts honed over 3 decades were screaming now. Everything about this situation was wrong. The humans calmed the vessel's impossible specifications, the fact that they'd been watching, learning, positioning themselves precisely where the Cathine fleet would inevitably deploy. And this wasn't a trespasser caught by superior forces. This was a trap, and the Cathine had walked into it willingly. Commander Chen, Vextar said, forcing his voice to remain steady. You claim to be a patrol vessel. Patrol vessels don't carry weapons capable of threatening fleet formations. You're absolutely correct, Commander. There was a pause, and Vextar could almost hear the smile in her voice. We're not carrying weapons capable of threatening fleet formations. Relief flickered through the war room. We're carrying weapons capable of neutralizing fleet formations. Chen continued. There's a difference. Would you like a demonstration? You're bluffing, Vexstar said, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his words. I'm really not. And Commander, oh, the fact that you haven't ordered your fleet to open fire tells me you're beginning to understand that. She was right. Vextar's claws hovered over the firing authorization had hovered there for the past 30 seconds, but something primal and instinctual kept him from entering the command. Every lesson learned in void combat, every tactical principle drilled into him, since Laurel training was telling him the same thing. When an enemy remains calm in the face of overwhelming force, they know something you don't. Final warning, Commander Vexar Chen said, her voice losing its conversational tone and taking on something harder, more formal. Withdraw your forces. This doesn't have to escalate. Vexar's pride wared with his survival instinct. The pride won. All ships he commanded in his voice carrying across the fleet-wide channel. Open fire, full bombardment. I want that vessel reduced to atoms. The last thing he heard before the firing sequence began was Chen's voice, quiet and resigned. That was unfortunate. Then the Resolute woke up. 47 warships opened fire simultaneously. The void became light incarnate. Plasma cannons that could boil oceans discharged their fury. Kinetic accelerators launched tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. Particle beams carved streams of annihilation through space. Missile pods vomited their payloads in spiraling trajectories, each warhead carrying enough destructive potential to crack a moon. It was the kind of bombardment that could sterilize a planet, the kind of firepower that had shattered pirate armadas and brought planetary governments to their knees. All 300 years of Catherine military evolution condensed into a single overwhelming salvo. The war room of the sovereign Talon erupted in chittering approval. On the tactical display, tracking systems painted the converging weapons fire as thousands of red vectors, all terminating at the human vessel's coordinates. Vextar watched mandibles spread in anticipation of the imminent destruction. The first weapons reached the Resolute, and something impossible happened. The plasma bolts, each one carrying temperatures that rivaled stellar cores, struck an invisible barrier 3 meters from the human vessel's hull and simply converted. The superheated matter transformed into harmless, visible light, scattering in rainbow prismatic patterns that painted the surrounding void in colors that shouldn't exist in nature. The kinetic slugs had traveling at a significant fraction of light speed hit the same barrier and stopped. Not slowed, not deflected, stopped instantaneously as if they'd collided with the fundamental structure of space itself. They hung there for a microsecond, suspended in physics, defying stasis before disintegrating into their component atoms. The particle beams encountered the barrier and bent, curving away from the Resolute like light, passing too close to a black hole's event horizon, dissipating harmlessly into empty space. The missiles detonated early, their proximity sensors registering impact against something their programming insisted wasn't there. Fusion fire bloomed around the human vessel in a corona of miniature suns, and the Resolute sat at the center of that apocalyptic display completely untouched, as if the explosions were happening in a different reality. The bombardment continued for 15 seconds. 15 seconds of continuous, overwhelming firepower. 15 seconds of the Cathene Collective's finest weapons technology being deployed with perfect precision. 15 seconds of achieving absolutely nothing. When the firing sequence finally ended, not because it had accomplished its purpose, but because ammunition capacitors needed to cycle, the Resolute remained exactly where it had been. Its hull unmarked, its systems unchanged, floating serenely in the dissipating plasma clouds like a leaf on still water. The silence in the war room was absolute. Damage assessment, Vexar said, his voice barely audible. No damage detected. Commander Crishaw's antennae were pressed flat against her carapace. A fear response Vexar had only seen once before, when a quantum singularity had nearly consumed an entire patrol group. Commander, the vessel never activated shields. Its defensive systems never engaged. We didn't overload them or penetrate them. They're simply not affected by our weapons. That's impossible, Velix whispered. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, fusion warheads. We deployed every category of destructive force known to galactic civilization. At least one should have. Nothing in our arsenal can touch them. Crishaw interrupted, her scientific composure finally cracking. Commander, their defensive field, if it even is a field, operates on principles our physics doesn't account for. It's not a shield. Shields absorb or deflect energy. This is conversion negation. It's as if their technology simply tells the universe that weapons don't work near their hull, and the universe obeys. Vexar stared at the tactical display, watching 47 ships maintain their formation around a target they couldn't harm. 30 years of combat experience, thousands of engagements, hundreds of species encountered. Not once had he faced an enemy his weapons couldn't even touch. The communication channel opened again. Chen's voice filled the war room, and this time Vexthar heard something in it he hadn't before. Not anger, but disappointment. "You were warned, Commander." "What are you?" Vexar demanded. "I told you. United Human Systems Patrol Vessel Resolute. You really should have listened." "No species in known space possesses this technology," Vexar said. His mind racing through possibilities, searching for an explanation that fit within his understanding of reality. "Are you using ancient technology? Did you find a cache from one of the precursor races Commander Humanity developed faster than light travel 43 years ago? We've been exploring space for less than half a century. This is Ardos, our technology. We built it. We designed it. And this," there was a pause heavy with implication, "is what we give our patrol vessels." The math was impossible. The Catherine Collective had been spacefaring for 4,000 years. 4,000 years of accumulated knowledge. Incremental advances, technological evolution, and these humans, barely a blip in galactic history, had somehow leapfrogged millennia of development. "You're lying," Vexithar said. But the words sounded hollow even to himself. "I wish I were. It would make this easier." Chen's voice softened slightly. "Commander, you attacked a patrol vessel. Not a warship, not a dreadnought. A patrol vessel conducting routine deep space observations. You had every chance to withdraw. I gave you every warning protocol requires, but you chose to fire. Then you leave me no choice." Vexthar began his claw, moving toward the fleet-wide targeting override that would coordinate a second, more focused bombardment. "Commander, please don't," the police stopped him. Not a command, not a threat, a request spoken with the kind of weariness that came from knowing what was about to happen and wishing there were another way. "I have defensive protocols I'm now required to engage," Chen continued. "Not weapons defensive measures. But Commander, your ships won't survive them. Please order your fleet to withdraw. While you still can. We still outnumber you 47-1, Vexthar said, but his conviction was crumbling like sand in a storm. "Yes, you do." Vexthar looked at his tactical display at the massive fleet formation surrounding a single small vessel. By every metric that mattered in void combat, ship count, total tonnage, combined firepower, the Cathan held overwhelming superiority. But superiority meant nothing when your weapons were irrelevant. "Defensive protocols," he said carefully. "I tried to warn you, Commander. I really did." The Resolute changed not physically. Its hull remained the same. Its position unchanged, but every sensor in the Cathan fleet suddenly screamed an alarm as the vessel's energy signature exploded exponentially. While the dormant systems Krisha had detected earlier activated in a cascading sequence, and the power output that had been theoretically capable of exceeding the entire fleet's generation suddenly became very, very real. Commander Krishaw's voice was pure panic now. "Energy spike. The vessel is generating power equivalent to correction exceeding. I can't get an accurate reading. It's off our measurement scale. Evasive maneuvers." Vexthar shouted, though he had no idea what they were evading. "All ships scatter formation." Too late. Asterisk. The Resolute's hull plates shifted with mechanical precision, revealing apertures that hadn't been visible before. No weapons emerged, just openings, empty spaces that shouldn't have meant anything. A pulse emanated from the human vessel. Not light, not radiation, or not plasma or particles or any form of energy the Catherine sensors could properly classify. It simply was a wave of something fundamental that rippled outward through space at faster than light speeds, passing through the Catherine formation like a ghost through walls. 12 ships died instantly, not destroyed, disabled. The frigate Claw of Justice went dark, every system failing simultaneously. The cruiser Eternal Mandate lost main power, auxiliary power, and emergency backups in the same microsecond. 10 more vessels across the formation experienced the same catastrophic systems failure. Their crews suddenly floating in rapidly cooling darkness, life support offline, communications dead, every piece of technology reduced to inert metal, and the Resolute hadn't fired a weapon. Whatever that pulse was, it simply turned technology off. Asterisk us report. Vexthar screamed into the fleet channel. All ships report status. 35 voices responded, panicked, confused, demanding orders. 12 ships remained silent. "Kriya, what was that? I don't know." The sensor adept was frantically reviewing her instruments, her scientific training collapsing in the face of data that made no sense. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse, but it propagated faster than light and passed through our shielding as if it didn't exist. It targeted electronic systems, specifically left biological and mechanical components untouched. "Commander, our shields were raised. That pulse ignored them completely." Vexthar pulled up the casualty reports. 12 ships, 12 crews now trapped in dead vessels dependent on rescue before their air ran out or the cold of space killed them. And, and the human had done it with a single what-shot pulse gesture. That was 15% power, Chen's voice said quietly. One pulse. Defensive protocols only. I targeted your ship's systems, not your crews. They're alive. You have approximately 6 hours to retrieve them before life support failure becomes critical. 15% repeated, his mandibles trembling. You disabled 12 warships with 15% of, would you like me to demonstrate 30%? Chen asked. I can disable your entire fleet, Commander. Every ship, including yours. Your crews will survive, but you'll be floating in dead metal waiting for rescue, hoping we're merciful enough to provide it. The tactical display showed the remaining 35 Catherine vessels, their formations broken, their confidence shattered. Andrew's ships that had been positioned in for optimal firing solutions were now trying to spread out to put distance between themselves and the small patrol vessel that had just demonstrated the capacity to neutralize them without effort. Or Chen continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. You can order a full withdrawal. Retrieve your disabled vessels and report to your superiors that the Catherine Collective has encountered something beyond its current understanding. Your choice, Commander, but choose quickly. My defensive protocols are now fully active and they're automated. If any of your ships lock weapons on the Resolute again, they'll fire without my authorization. Vexthar looked at his display, at the impossible vessel that sat at the center of his formation, radiating power that made his entire fleet seem like toys by comparison. He thought about the disabled ships, the surviving crews, the fact that this human could have killed them all, but chose not to. He thought about what would happen if this was truly a patrol vessel, the smallest, weakest class in any space navy. What would humanity's actual warships be capable of? The answer to that question terrified him more than anything he'd experienced in 3 decades of void combat. All ships, he said slowly, each word carved from humiliation and dawning horror. Stand down, disable weapons, prepare for full withdrawal. A wise decision, Commander, Chen said. What are you? Vexthar asked again, but this time the question was different. Not what species, not what technology, something more fundamental. How is this possible? We've been spacefaring for 4,000 years, but our technology is the result of millennia of advancement. You've barely left your home system, and you're advanced, Chen offered. Yes, Commander, we are. And that's what makes this situation so delicate. Delicate. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity exists. When it does, there will be a lot of species asking the same questions you're asking now. A lot of military strategists doing the math on what happened here today. A lot of governments realizing that the paradigm they've operated under for thousands of years has fundamentally changed. Vexthar understood the Catherine Collective's power in this sector came from technological superiority over their neighbors. But humanity's technological superiority over the Cathenian wasn't incremental. It was revolutionary, paradigm shattering. We're not conquerors, Whole Commander Chen said, and Vexthar heard genuine sincerity in her voice. We're explorers, observers. We came out here to learn not to dominate, but we also won't be threatened, won't be attacked, won't be treated as prey by species who assume we're weak because we're new. You could have destroyed us, Vexthar said quietly. Yes, why didn't you? Because that's not who we are. We defend, we protect, we respond proportionally. You attacked a patrol vessel in neutral space, so we disabled your attack capability and gave you the chance to retreat with honor. If you had attacked civilian vessels or colonies or engaged in genocide, Chen paused, then you would have learned what our warships can do. Be grateful you didn't. The communication channel closed. Vexus looked at his tactical display. On watching his once proud fleet beginning its retreat, maneuvers disabled vessels being trayed by their sister ships. The formation that had seemed so powerful minutes ago, now revealed as utterly inadequate. The Resolute remained motionless, watching them leave its power generation slowly decreasing as its defensive protocols powered down. A patrol vessel, humanity's smallest combat-capable ship, and it had broken an entire fleet without firing a single weapon. Velarix Vexothar said quietly, send a priority transmission to High Command, maximum encryption. Tell them the outer territories have a new power, and tell them we're not equipped to handle it. His tactical officer obeyed silently, and as the Sovereign Talon aligned for its withdrawal vector, Vexthar took one last look at the human vessel. It was still just sitting there, waiting, watching. He had surrounded one human ship with 47 warships, and he'd faced his own extinction. The Sovereign Talon's war room had lost its triumphant energy. Officers moved through their duties with mechanical precision, their chittering reduced to functional necessity. The holographic displays still glowed with tactical data, but now those readouts told a story of retreat rather than conquest. Disabled vessels secured an undertow. Velix reported his voice stripped of its earlier confidence. All crews accounted for. Minor casualties, hypothermia, oxygen deprivation in 3 cases where emergency suits failed to deploy properly. Medical teams report full recovery expected. Vexthar absorbed the information with a nod. They had been lucky. No, not lucky. They had been spared. How there was a difference, and that difference sat like acid in his digestive tract. Fleet status 35 vessels, operational formation, integrity at 40%. Moral cohesion. Velix paused, searching for word yards. Compromised commander. Compromised, a diplomatic term for shattered. Vexar could see it in the way his officers moved, the way their antennae drooped, the way their compound eyes kept flickering back to the sensor feeds, showing the Resolute still motionless, still watching their retreat with the patience of a predator that no longer needed to chase its prey. Time to Catherine territorial boundary. At current speeds, 16 hours, Commander. 16 hours of knowing that the human vessel could reach out across that distance and disable every ship in his fleet if it chose to. 16 hours of understanding, as with perfect clarity, that their survival was a gift, not a right. Krisha Vexthar said, sensor analysis full spectrum. I want every piece of data on that vessel compiled and transmitted to high command. The sensor adept worked in silence for several minutes, her claws dancing across her interface with the focused intensity of someone clinging to the familiar ritual of science in the face of inexplicable phenomena. Compilation complete, Commander. Her voice was steadier now, retreating into the comfort of data and analysis. But Commander, the readings are contradictory, impossible. Our instruments weren't designed to measure what we encountered. Summarize. Krishaw pulled up a holographic display, and Vexthar studied the data with growing unease. The defensive field that negated our weapons, she began, orates on principles our physics cannot explain. It doesn't generate a barrier. It appears to rewrite local physics. Our plasma bolts didn't bounce off a shield. They were converted into harmless photons before they could carry kinetic or thermal energy to the target. Our kinetic rounds didn't impact a surface. They encountered space itself, restructured to prevent motion. It's as if the humans have learned to program reality. And the pulse weapon, Vexithar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Not a weapon, Commander, an electromagnetic cascade that propagates through subspace faster than light, targeting specific technological systems while leaving organic and simple mechanical components untouched. It's selective intelligent. Moss, our ship's computers tried to implement countermeasures and couldn't. The pulse adapted in real time, found every backdoor, every vulnerability, every system dependency. It's technology that thinks. Velix made a sound that might have been laughter or despair. How do you fight an enemy whose weapons are smarter than your defenses? You don't, Vexithar said quietly. That's the lesson. You don't fight them at all. The priority transmission to Catherine High Command had been sent 12 minutes ago, traveling through quantum-entangled relays that made communication instantaneous across stellar distances. Vexthar expected a response within the hour. Demands for clarification, questions about his tactical decisions, possibly a reprimand for failing to secure an unauthorized vessel. What he received 3 minutes later, it was a fleet-wide emergency broadcast. All Cathene military vessels, all border patrol units, all system defense forces. The voice belonged to High Admiral Thexron, commander of the entire Catherine Collective Navy. Priority Alpha Directive. Any unidentified vessels displaying configuration consistent with transmitted schematics are to be monitored but not approached. Under no circumstances are weapons to be locked, targeting systems to be activated, or aggressive postures to be adopted. First contact protocols are suspended pending diplomatic review. This directive supersedes all territorial sovereignty protocols. Repeat, do not engage. Acknowledge receipt immediately. Vexthar felt his exoskeleton plates shift in surprise. Priority Alpha directives were reserved for civilization-ending threats. Rogue AI extragalactic invasion, a quantum singularity events. He had never expected to hear one issued in response to a single patrol vessel. Commander Krishaw said softly, "We're receiving data packets from 17 other Catherine vessels across 4 sectors. They're all reporting similar encounters. Similar." She pulled up the reports. Vexthar read them with mounting dread. Patrol Squadron Beta 7 encountered human research vessel in the Kelvin Expanse. Attempted escort to border. Vessel refused. Demonstrated faster than light travel without entering hyperspace. simply accelerated past light speed in normal space. Physics cannot explain, squadron unable to pursue. Defense Station Krimoth detected human vessel conducting surveys of neutron star. Station commander issued territorial challenge. Human vessel entered neutron star's gravity. While Io survived radiation and gravitational forces that would shred any known spacecraft. Emerged with complete survey data. Impossible to intercept or deter. Border Fleet Gamma surrounded human diplomatic transport. Transport requested passage through Catherine space. When denied transport, activated stealth system that renders vessel completely undetectable, not just to sensors, but to naked eye observation. Fleet fired on last known coordinates. Human ship reappeared 10,000 kilometers away, undamaged, requested passage. Again with greater emphasis, passage granted. 17 encounters, 17 demonstrations of technology that shouldn't exist. And those were just Catherine reports. Vextar's tactical instincts told him that other species, other governments, other militaries were receiving similar data at this very moment. They're everywhere, Valerie whispered. These humans, they're not just exploring, they're establishing presence, demonstrating capability, showing the galaxy what they can do. No, Vexathar said, understanding, crystallizing with cold clarity. They're teaching us not to make the same mistake twice. Every one of these encounters, they were provoked. We approached them. We challenged them. We threatened them. And they responded with exactly enough force to prove we couldn't win, but not enough to start a war. They're training us, Krisha said, her scientific mind grasping the pattern. Like you would train a young predator that doesn't understand its place in the ecosystem. They're showing us the boundaries, letting us experience the consequences of crossing them all, but not killing us for our ignorance. The implications settled over the war room like a funeral shroud. The Cathene Collective, powerful enough to dominate its stellar neighborhood for 4 centuries, had just been reduced to the status of children being taught not to play with things they didn't understand. Another transmission, this one from Catherine High Command directly. Vextar's neural interface flagged it as eyes-only maximum security. He retreated to his private chamber to receive it, the door sealing behind him with a finality that matched his mood. High Admiral Thexron's image materialized in holographic form. His ancient exoskeleton marked with the scars of a dozen campaigns. But his eyes compound and multifaceted, though they were held something Vex there had never seen there before. Fear. Commander Vexter and I reviewed your encounter logs and sensor data. The Admiral paused, mandibles working silently as he chose his words. I need you to understand something. What you face today, what you survived, has fundamentally altered our strategic position in this sector. The Council of Hierarchs has convened an emergency session. Our intelligence networks are reporting similar human encounters across 43 different stellar nations. Not just us, everyone. Sir, what are your orders? The collective is opening diplomatic channels with the United Human Systems immediately. We're requesting formal negotiations, territorial recognition agreements, technology exchange proposals. Thexron's voice hardened, and we're doing it from a position of acknowledged inferiority. Do you understand what that means, Commander? The Cathene Collective has never negotiated from a subordinate position. Never in 4,000 years. Vextar understood. It meant the balance of power in this region of space had shifted so dramatically, so completely, that species who had considered themselves apex predators were now reassessing their place in the galactic food chain. There's something else. The Admiral continued. Our intelligence analysts have been reviewing the data from all reported encounters. Commander, in not one case did humans initiate hostility. In every single incident, we or someone else made the first aggressive move. The humans responded defensively, demonstrated overwhelming capability, then offered withdrawal terms every time. They're trying not to start a war. Vextar said, yes, which terrifies me more than if they were conquering Mio, because it means they're confident enough in their superiority that they don't need to prove it through conquest. They can afford to be patient, to be merciful, to let us come to terms with the new reality at our own pace. Vextar thought about the Resolute, about Commander Chen's tired voice offering him warnings. He'd been too proud to accept, about the way she'd disabled his ships without killing anyone, given him time to retrieve his crews, let him retreat with enough dignity to save face before his superiors. What happens now, sir? Now Thexron's expression was unreadable. Now we adapt. We learn. We accept that humanity has entered the galactic stage, and they entered it as our technological superiors. The hierarchs are already discussing whether we should pursue alliance, trade agreements, defensive pacts, anything to ensure that if humanity ever does decide to expand through military force, they consider us friends rather than obstacles. And if other species don't adapt, if they see humanity as a threat to be eliminated, the Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then we'll discover what human warships can actually do. Commander, and based on what their patrol vessels demonstrated today, I pray to the old makers that we're never in a position to witness it. The communication ended, leaving Vexar alone in his chamber with thoughts that would likely haunt him for the rest of his career. He returned to the war room where his officers waited with the careful stillness of subordinates who knew their commander had just received news that would reshape their future. Status of the Resolute, Vexar asked, asterisk still in position. Duck Commander Crishaw reported maintaining minimal power output, not pursuing, just observing. She's making sure we actually leave, Velrich said, confirming we're following through on our withdrawal. No, Vexar corrected, staring at the sensor image of the small human vessel. She's giving us time to think about what happened here, time to understand, time to make the right choice when we report to our superiors. He turned to face his officers, seeing his own shaken certainty reflected in their postures. Today we encountered something beyond our understanding, he said formally. We made tactical errors based on assumptions about technological limitations that no longer apply. We learned that the galaxy has changed while we weren't paying attention. Oh, and we survived that lesson because our enemy chose to be merciful. Are they our enemy, Commander? Krisha asked quietly. Vexter considered the question, considered Commander Chen's weary voice, her multiple warnings, her careful application of force designed to disable rather than destroy. Considered the fact that humanity could have annihilated his fleet and chose not to. No, he said finally. They're not our enemy, but we need to make certain we never become theirs. The Sovereign Talon crossed into Cathene territorial space 17 hours after the engagement. Its disabled sister ships undertow its surviving crew, exhausted and silent. Vexar stood in his war room, watching the Resolute finally disappear from his long-range sensors, while the human vessel resuming whatever patrol route it had been following before 47 warships had made the catastrophic decision to surround it. He began composing his official report with the methodical precision of someone who knew every word would be scrutinized by the hierarchs, analyzed by military strategists, and eventually disseminated to allied governments. Across a dozen stellar nations. The truth would spread regardless of how he framed it, but he could at least ensure it spread accurately. Incident report. First contact engagement. Human patrol vessel. Summary. Catherine Border Fleet encountered United Human Systems patrol vessel in neutral space. Attempted containment under territorial sovereignty protocols. Human vessel demonstrated technological capabilities exceeding Cathene collective military capacity by significant margin. Fleet withdrew after sustaining 0 casualties, but 12 vessels disabled. Recommendation: immediate diplomatic engagement and revise first contact protocols for human vessels. The words felt inadequate. How did you quantify the experience of watching your entire understanding of galactic power dynamics shatter in real time? How did you explain to the hierarchs that a single patrol vessel, not even a warship, had rendered 4 centuries of Catherine military evolution obsolete? He submitted the report and sealed it with his command authorization, knowing it would reach the highest levels of Cathid. And then he did something he hadn't done in 30 years of military service. He requested reassignment to diplomatic corps training. If the future belonged to negotiating with humanity rather than fighting them, Vexter wanted to be part of that future. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out with variations on the same theme. The Saurian Confederacy issued a priority 1 alert after 3 of their mining colonies reported human survey vessels operating in previously uncharted systems. Systems the Saurians had planned to claim, but now realized they'd have to negotiate for. The Venn Collective recalled its exploration fleets from the galactic rim after encountering human research vessels that could dive into stellar coronas and emerge with complete spectroscopic data. Alam, the Talic hegemony, suspended all expansion plans in the outer territories and convened emergency sessions to discuss the human question. In the United Human System, Strategic Command, deep within a reinforced station orbiting Titan, Admiral Marcus Webb reviewed the incident reports with the careful attention of someone who had predicted this moment years ago. 43 separate encounters in the past 6 months. 43 opportunities for humanity's carefully orchestrated introduction to galactic politics to go catastrophically wrong. 43 moments where nervous alien commanders could have escalated beyond what even human technology could de-escalate peacefully. But the protocols had held. Every patrol vessel commander, every research ship captain, every human in contact with the alien forces had followed the directive. Warn, demonstrate, defend, withdraw, never initiate, never conquer, never give the galaxy a reason to unite against humanity's emergence. Webb pulled up the tactical logs from the Resolute reading Commander Chen's after-action report with professional approval. Engaged defensive protocols at 15% capacity. Disabled 12 hostile vessels. 0 casualties. Offered withdrawal terms. Terms accepted. Fleet retreated. Intact. Recommend combination for restraint under fire. Could have neutralized entire formation SOM but chose minimum necessary force. Could have neutralized entire formation, Webb murmured, allowing himself a grim smile. Chen was being modest. The Resolute could have disabled all 47 ships simultaneously if she'd chosen full power deployment, but that would have sent the wrong message. All humanity didn't need to prove they could destroy every threat. They needed to prove they chose not to. His comm panel chimed, a priority transmission from the diplomatic corps. Webb accepted it, and Secretary General Aisha Kamani's face appeared, her expression carefully neutral. Admiral, I've been receiving communication requests from 17 different stellar governments in the past 3 hours. All of them want to establish formal diplomatic relations. All of them have significantly softened their territorial demands. And all of them are using the same phrase, mutually beneficial cooperation. Translation: they're terrified and want to make sure we see them as friends rather than obstacles. Precisely. Keeman leaned back in her chair. The question is, how do we respond? We could leverage this fear into territorial concessions, of preferential trade agreements, access to resources we'd otherwise have to negotiate for. No, Webb interrupted. We respond exactly as we've been responding, with patience, fairness, and respect. We negotiate as equals even though we're not. We accept reasonable terms even when we could demand better. We prove that our technological superiority doesn't make us conquerors. Kamani studied him for a long moment. You really believe that's sustainable, that we can maintain this moral high ground when every species we encounter will be looking for ways to exploit our restraint? It's not about sustainability, Madam Secretary. It's about foundation. What we do now in these first years, these first encounters, will define how humanity is perceived for centuries. But we can be the species that entered the galactic stage and immediately dominated through force. Or we can be the species that entered with power and chose to use it defensively. And when someone tests us, when some warlord or empire decides that our restraint is weakness, Webb's expression hardened. Then we demonstrate the difference between a patrol vessel and a warship, and the galaxy learns why we've been so careful about showing our full capabilities. The conversation ended, but Webb remained at his console, reviewing the growing database of alien encounters. 17 governments seeking diplomacy. 43 incident reports showing human vessels demonstrating capability without aggression, and thousands of alien sensor readings being analyzed by xenotechnology experts trying to understand how humanity had achieved such rapid advancement. Let them wonder, Webb thought. Let them speculate about human research methods, theoretical breakthroughs, technological paradigms. Let them fear what they didn't understand. That fear would buy humanity time. Time to establish presence, time to build alliances, time to ensure that when the full truth of human capabilities became known, it would be accepted rather than fought. On the bridge of the Resolute commander, Sarah Chin filed her patrol log with the same routine professionalism she brought to every shift. The engagement with the Catherine fleet was noted as a minor territorial incident, barren resolved without casualties. She flagged it for review by diplomatic corps, but rated it as low priority. Just another overly confident alien fleet learning that humanity wasn't easy prey. Her crew had already resumed normal operations, the encounter forgotten in the routine of deep space observation. Only her executive officer, Lieutenant James Harrison, seemed troubled, standing at the observation port and staring at the stars. Something on your mind, Lieutenant Chen asked. Just thinking, Commander, that fleet, they really believed they could take us. 47 ships against one, and they thought they had the advantage. They did have the advantage by their understanding of naval combat. We can't fault them for not knowing what they didn't know. But we could have Harrison stopped himself, could have destroyed them. Yes, all easily in about 30 seconds if we deployed offensive systems instead of defensive protocols. Chen moved to stand beside him. That's why we didn't. Every species we encounter needs to learn the same lesson. Humanity is powerful, but we're not monsters. We could dominate, but we choose to coexist. That choice, that restraint, is more important than any demonstration of firepower. Do you think it'll work long-term? Chen considered the question. Out there in the darkness, hundreds of alien civilizations were receiving reports about human vessels, analyzing data, making decisions about how to respond to humanity's emergence. Some would choose diplomacy, some would choose avoidance, and some inevitably would choose aggression, convinced that human restraint was weakness to be exploited. Ma, it'll work with the smart ones, she said finally. The ones who understand that technology this advanced, wielded with this much restraint, means we don't need to prove anything. As for the others, she trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. The others will learn the hard way. Yes, they will. 16 hours later, in the Catherine Collective's Hall of Hierarchs, Fleet Commander Vex there stood before the assembled leadership and delivered his testimony. He described the encounter with clinical precision, showed the sensor recordings, played the audio of Commander Chen's warnings, and then, as the hierarchs absorbed the implications of what they had witnessed, he spoke the words that would reshape Cath, through a strategic doctrine for generations. We surrounded one human, he said quietly, his voice carrying through the massive chamber. Metal one ship, one crew, and we faced our extinction. They could have killed us. Their technology, their weapons, their defensive systems, everything about their vessels suggested they could have annihilated our fleet without sustaining damage. But they didn't. They disabled our attack capability, gave us time to retrieve our crews, and let us retreat with our lives and our dignity. He paused, letting the weight of that mercy sink in. The question before this assembly is not whether humanity is powerful. We have proof of that. The question is whether we will be wise enough to recognize that their restraint is more terrifying than their weapons, because it means they're confident enough in their superiority that they don't need to prove it through conquest. They can afford to be patient, to wait, to let us come to terms with the new reality. Hierarch Thalva's eldest of the council clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You're suggesting the Catherine Collective should pursue alliance with a species that just demonstrated they could destroy us. No, Hierarch. I'm suggesting we should pursue alliance with a species that demonstrated they could destroy us and chose not to. There's a difference, and that difference might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and a war we cannot win. The hall fell silent. Vextar knew his words bordered on sedition. The Cathene Collective had built its power on the principle of never acknowledging superiority. But the evidence was undeniable, displayed on every screen, recorded in every sensor log, confirmed by every ship that had encountered human vessels. On motion to establish formal diplomatic relations with the United Human Systems, Falk said finally, priority status, full ambassadorial delegation, and someone find out what they want, because species this powerful always want something. But that was where the hierarchs were wrong, Vexer realized as he left the chamber. Humanity didn't want territory or tribute or submission. They wanted something far more dangerous. Respect, acknowledgement, a place in the galactic community as equals, not conquerors. And they were willing to demonstrate overwhelming power over and over until every species understood that humanity's position at the table wasn't negotiable. 3 months later, the first formal diplomatic summit between humanity and 17 stellar nations convened on a neutral station in the Kepler expanse. The negotiations were tense, complicated by millennia of established territorial claims and power structures that humanity's emergence had destabilized. But when alien delegates demanded proof of human intentions, demanded guarantees that humanity wouldn't use its technological advantage to expand through conquest, the human response was simple. We've been in contact with your civilizations for 6 months. In that time, we've been threatened, surrounded, fired upon, and challenged 43 separate times. We've disabled ships, demonstrated capabilities, and defended our vessels. But we haven't conquered a single system, claimed a single colony, or demanded a single concession through force. Our intentions are proven through our actions. We could dominate. We choose to negotiate. The summit lasted 3 weeks. When it ended, humanity had formal diplomatic recognition from every major government in the sector, established trade agreements on equitable terms, and secured an unprecedented agreement, the Kepler Accords, which recognized humanity's right to explore established presence and defend its vessels, while simultaneously committing humanity to defensive rather than offensive military postures. It was the alien delegates agreed. The most favorable terms any emerging species had ever negotiated. What they didn't realize, what humanity carefully avoided mentioning, was that those terms cost humanity nothing. They were already committed to defensive postures, already exploring rather than conquering, already operating under the doctrine that had guided every encounter. Demonstrate capability, offer peace, reserve full power for genuine threats. The Kepler Accords simply formalized what humanity had already decided for itself, and in the process they established humanity as the galactic community's newest superpower, one that had earned its position not through conquest, but through something far more enduring. The terrifying combination of overwhelming capability and deliberate restraint. Commander Sarah Chen received notification of the Accord's ratification while on patrol in the same sector where she'd encountered the Cathene fleet. She read through the diplomatic summary, noted the concessions and agreements, and filed it away with the same professional detachment she brought to all non-essential communications. Then she returned to her survey, data cataloging stellar phenomena and mapping unexplored systems. I remember doing the quiet work of exploration that humanity had come to space to accomplish. Behind her in the darkness of deep space, the galaxy was still adjusting to the revelation that humanity had arrived, and that arrival had fundamentally changed the rules everyone else had been playing by. The age of alien dominance hadn't ended with war or conquest. It had ended with a single patrol vessel, surrounded by 47 warships, calmly informing its attackers that they had one chance to withdraw. Most of them had been smart enough to take it. What do you think about this clash between alien arrogance and human power? Share your thoughts below and remember to like and subscribe for more HFY stories.